Hey everybody, we're Pressgang Mutiny. I'm Richard.
I'm Stefan.
I'm James.
And today I am super stoked because we are chatting with Séan McCann. Séan McCann is the co-founder of Great Big Sea. He's a legendary Shanty Man. He's an author and a performer. So we're going to spend some time with him talking about his new album, talking a little bit about his shanty journey and getting a little bit of insight from the man himself. So aren't we lucky? Let's get right into it.
Tell me where.
All right, so we're here, we're Pressgang Mutiny, and this is the Shanty Show. We are with Séan McCann, and I kind of can't believe it. I was talking to James just a couple minutes ago about being at the back of the tour bus with the choir school, sitting there with Patrick Cotter splitting headphones and listening to this man sing shanties to us so long ago in my youth. And now we're sitting here talking about sea shanties on our show. So it's just a little bit of a moment for me, honestly. Thank you so much, Séan, for your time today. This is just a real gift to us, so thank you.
Awesome. Was I on that bus? Was I on the bus?
Via CD, via early compact disc. We were.
Oh, okay.
I've
been on a lot of buses, and I can't remember a lot of it. So, good question.
Yeah, no. James and I have history in our youth being a couple of choir boys. So we would travel around and sing at different churches around Canada and the U.S. and Great Big Sea was definitely a part of the playlist for us. So
from choir boy to Shanty Man.
Choir boy to Shanty.
That's you walked across the floor there, man.
I guess so.
Well, it's funny to that point. Actually, I have to say, having gone through the choir experience for 11 years. Having graduated, I didn't really have a particular interest in continuing with choral music. I was at that point playing in Irish pubs all the time, playing fiddle and a bit of folk songs and that kind of thing. But when I heard your version of General Taylor, that kind of stopped me in my tracks, and that was something that made me realize I would like to record just one song like this at some point in my life.
Well, General Taylor gained the day, walk 'em along. Well, General Taylor, he gained the day. Tell me where you store me. Walk 'em along, John, carry 'em along. Tell me where you store me. Carry him to his burying ground.
And then, fast forward a few years later, and we formed the group Pressgang Mutiny. And I have to say a big thank you to you, because that really was one of the huge inspirations for me to want to learn more about this tradition.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's a great shanty. I learned that from the singing of Fergus O'Byrne in St. John's, who's an Irish guy from Dublin, and he was in a band called Ryan's Fancy. And they ended up in Newfoundland going to university in the 70s. So I grew up with those guys literally in my backyard. Like they were great shanty singers, great traditional players, a good show, but great powerful singers. And I guess they had the same effect on me. Once I heard the power in what they could do, I was drawn into that, as opposed away from like the Clash and towards the Pogues.
Yeah, cool. And that's kind of going right into my first question. Is I'm curious about shanties in your youth, and what were some of the first shanties that you remember hearing, and how was important to you growing up?
Donkey riding was which we recorded with the Barras, which was they played extremely well on that. They're my favorite kind of East Coast band. But donkey riding, I was singing that in kindergarten.
Was you ever in the machine where you tie up to a tree and the girl sit on your knee riding on a donkey? Way, hey, away we go, donkey riding, way, hey, away we go, riding on a donkey.
And I think we learned it in kindergarten. It was definitely in the curriculum. It was omnipresent in St. John's, where I grew up and went to school. It was just everywhere. Like it was in the kitchens, obviously, and it was in the schools. It was in the pubs. It was on the radio. It was literally our constant soundtrack.
Cool.
And it never went away. And I guess I ended up starting to do a master's in folklore at Memorial because I'd met some of these serious academic collectors who were mostly Americans, some Brits, but they all come to Newfoundland to collect this stuff because it kind of came there over the centuries and it never left.
Yeah.
So they could find variants being sung not only by older people but by people my age and younger, but just by traveling around the outport communities, and they could collect them like bags of these songs, right?
Yeah.
So I actually went down that path, and I don't know. In answer to your question, it was always a part of my life. It was never something I had to look very hard to find.
Yeah, cool. I like how donkey riding jumps right out. Yeah, I'm thinking back to Lilia, my daughter, and I think she was 3.5 or 4. Stefan, you're smiling because you know what I'm about to say. When we were at the local on Roncesvalles in Toronto, and she hopped up on stage, and she was barely talking, but hopped up, and I held her, and she was right beside the microphone and belted out that first verse of donkey riding. So
yeah, the kids love donkey riding. And
they do. Yeah.
They love the Paddy Murphy as well. So it's I'm responsible for a lot of. I have to answer for much, I think.
Yeah.
Now I'm intrigued with your new project. You're drawing a connection with the lumber songs as well, which is something I know Durflinger talks about that in his book. That Shanty Man and Shanty Boys, and is that connection with shanty singing, and also the guys working in the lumber camps. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about that connection, because that's something I don't feel many other people have really explored very much.
Yeah, we're. I mean, if you Google the definition of Shanty Man, what comes up first will be a lumberjack, and that's the. I think if you're reading an American dictionary, that's what it'll say. But if it's the British side, then it'll be a sailor. But they both have, and so the name applies both ways, and they both have these strong tradition of songs that helped them do the work, like that they were real shanties. So they had a lead singer and a call and response for, I guess, in the woods, chopping woods, hauling logs, doing all those dangerous, physically demanding jobs, right? Just like the sailors would do. So, but there's not, I mean, there's some beautiful songs, like Great Big Sea recorded the River Driver, which we found. And there's some in Newfoundland that were really cool. But there's not as many of them, but in the American tradition, you'll find more lumberjack songs. I don't know if it's because they didn't I suspect that it's because they didn't travel. Like the sea shanties traveled all over the world. They were viral, they were a thing. They could travel. They were on ships, but lumberjacks, not so much. Like they probably didn't cover as much ground. So maybe, they're a little harder to find.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the impetus behind the new project, the album Shanty Man. I came across a quote from you that music is medicine, and that you say, I believe it's no accident that the shanty is resurfacing now when we so desperately need songs to bind us. Could you talk a little bit about why this project and why now?
Yeah, I managed to pay the bills doing virtual work during the pandemic, which of course we thought would last about 2 weeks. I mean, we put out a book right the first week the pandemic hit. We dropped a book, published our book, One Good Reason, myself and my wife, and everything got canceled. Our national book tour got canceled, and everything went virtual, which was, we made it work, but it was a lot of work. Like I've never worked so hard for so little return, not just financially, but there's no heat coming off the screen, and it's kind of what I live off. And so that was very difficult. And when we hit last winter and it was still, we're still here and it's getting, it was a bad time COVID wise. I was really kind of like down, and I just came up here. I've had an active shanty file. Like I've always been the Shanty Man in Great Big Sea. And I mean, I've always been into it. So I've got this active file. I've got 82 that I've left in my bucket list that I want to record. And I just, I came up here one day in my little man cave. This is my little demo room. And I literally stood up and pulled one out of the file and started singing it. And it was actually Shanty Man's Life. And it felt good. Felt really good to really like use my body, that physical, it's a physically demanding way to sing, and I was belting it out in here, and I could hear it all over the house. And you know, my kids are like, what? His dad has lost his mind completely up there. He's, you know, he's screaming his head off up there, you know. And I came down and I was like, I felt better for it. My mood had lifted, and that's why I kept doing it. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this every day, and, you know, and see how, and because it's improving my well-being, my mental well-being. And then I started, you know, to demo them and track them and then arrange them and poke around with them and produce them. And that was it. You know, I made this entire record actually like by myself, playing all the instruments and creating all the stuff. And I was going to release it as a really kind of just what I did on my pandemic, like a very indie, gritty, stripped down record. But when I heard it all in context, like I had a dozen songs, and I'm like, I made enough records to know that it was a record, a real record. And that meant to me that I really had to serve the songs and bring them to their potential, which for me meant spend some money, reach out to Hawksley, get the real drums and bass going. And JP Cormier came next with the bizarre, like he's a crazy fiddler. Mm-hmm. And we did all that remotely. None of us, none of this was done in the same room, but those guys are really competent. They were really interested in the songs. I think I picked songs that they happen to like. They're not traditional guys at all, which didn't scare me because I did want it to evolve. And then the last key to the equation was Gordie Johnson, Big Sugar, and we did a lot of touring with them. I loved that band. They're extremely loud, and I know he mixes stuff in a big way. And that was kind of the, I don't know. That was kind of the riskiest thing. So, because you don't go to him and you know, or Hawksley or JP and tell them what you want. You talk to them for half an hour, and they do what they want. And so they all bought their A game, and now the record really, I'm really happy with the way it sounds. You know, you know, I've never done a record this way, but I think we got lucky. I picked the right songs and I picked the right people. And they were all on this. They really liked it, and you can hear the energy that they put in.
Yeah, I really love the Shantyman's life, and Gordie's contribution to that is he's bringing his own kind of flavor to it. And it reminds me of, he was pretty involved with the Ashley McIsaac album as well, I believe. Hi, How Are You Today? So it's kind of an interesting connection there as well.
Could have been. I've met a dozen guys who said they produced that record, though. It's like, there's a lot of producers on that one. But I heard Gordie's name, but I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, he was around that time. Big Sugar were great, but I always liked his production work. He produced the Joel Plaskett record, Ashtray Rock, which I loved. But he's a real skilled mixer. I tell you, though, it's no sense asking him to turn anything down, because I remember at one point, I can't remember which song, but I asked him to turn down a guitar, and he just laughed at me. He said, "No, I can't do that. I'll tell you what I'll do, Sean. I'll turn everything else up," which is what he did, and he was right.
Yeah, there you go.
It all sounds good at 11. And it's funny, like, so he was on my list. Hawksley produced my favorite Great Big Sea record, which was Safe Upon the Shore. Fortune's Favor is the name of the album. And we almost broke the poor fella. I mean, he survived, but he had a hard time. And then I wanted to have Gordie produce a Great Big Sea record. And you know, there was some hesitancy, so we brought him into St. John's. He was in St. John's for a show, and we brought him out to our local pub and sat him down. And one of the boys asked him, "What would you do what would you do with the next Great Big Sea record if you were the producer? What would be your vision for that?" And he said, he looked at me and he said, "What's that boron thingy? That's that drum thingy you play." And I'm like, "That's a boron." And he's like, "Oh, okay. I'd take that thingy, that drum thingy, and I'd make that loud as fuck." And I'm like, "Yes, that's amazing. I've been waiting for that. You perfect. You're the guy. You're
my champion."
Yeah, you're obviously you're the guy we need. But I looked around the table and I was the only one who was excited to hear that. And I saw the lights go down in the eyeballs, and I knew. So I told Gordie that he'd forgotten that episode. But the boron on Shanty Man is loud as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually,
It is.
that stuck out to me. The tones are so great on the bow on that album, and also it was really interesting hearing JP Cormier playing a little outside of that sort of Cape Breton and bluegrass kind of style that I normally associate with him with. So hearing more of the improvisation and different flavors mixing together there.
Yeah, he's a gun. I'd never worked with him before. I noticed his playing on a Joel Plaskett is a real good friend of mine, produced a couple of my records. And he was mixing a record and I was in Halifax and I was in spent in the afternoon with him. Like we're just hanging and I'm listening and this fiddle track, comes out of nowhere and I'm like, who's that? And he's like JP Cormier. And I'd heard the name before and I'm like, that doesn't sound like any fiddle player I know. And anyway, I remembered the sound on Joel's record. And I actually called him when I knew I wanted a fiddler on this record. I did all the whistles and stuff. I didn't want accordions or banjos, but I did think I wanted a fiddle. And I remembered that track. And he told me he hooked me up with JP. And I talked to JP for like half an hour and it became obvious to me he's fluent in not just Irish fiddle or he's Appalachian. He knows all the fiddle, and not just fiddle, but he really knew with no direction. He's like, yeah, just send it to me and, I'll just do what I do. And he gave me more than I needed. Like he played really tasty stuff and it's not quantifiable. It's not an Irish fiddle. It's not a British fiddle. It's very much a different thing. So I'm really grateful that I remembered that track,
Yeah, I felt it really suited the flavor of the songs and the project overall. So yeah, really, really tasteful playing.
After Hawksley played, he didn't really have much room and he managed to make use of every little bit of space we left him.
How'd you go about selecting the songs for this project? And the reason I'm asking that question is to get to, like, in your mind, what makes a really good shanty?
Well, in this case, it was literally me singing them out loud. I picked 2 different ones a day and, and I do my like emails and stuff or my virtual work. And when the kids are either online or in school, I think they're mostly online in the winter, I'd come in here and I'd test drive them. I'd sing them and I'd record myself, just me and guitar or just me and boron and just blast them out. And the ones I liked the most, they're the ones I picked. The ones that I had a physical reaction to, that I felt good about, that made me feel good. That was the criteria. And that's how I picked these. But there's different ways, I guess, if you were looking for different songs. But that was literally, I rated them based on how I reacted to them mentally.
Yep.
One of the things we've talked about with some other guests on the show is the sort of improvisatory nature of the shanties and then how it sort of gets collected, as you sort of mentioned, the song collectors that might be coming out of the States or Britain. And it's sort of, we get a specific version and people don't tend to stray too far from that. But one of the things I liked is the sort of recontextualizing that you've done with this album with the different instruments. And also a little thing that stuck out to me too was in Go to Sea Once More, where you say, there goes McCann, the Shanty Man, he must go to sea once more. Because in the other lyrics, there's another name. So I like that little touch as well there.
I spent the night with Angeline, too drunk to roll in bed. Me watch was new, me money too. In the morning with them she fled. And as I walked the streets about, the whores they all did call. There goes McCann, the Shanty Man, he must go to sea once more.
Just happened to rhyme.
That's great.
But I took great liberties with lyrics and some with the melodies and the arrangements, certainly. And I just, for me, it's always been an evolution. Like, I'll find a song that I like, and then, it's fair game then, though. Once I go down a path, it's like, what can I do with this? How can I make this my song? And one of my favorite singers, who wasn't a shanty man, but he was a great singer and a great interpreter of songs, was Johnny Cash. And great voice, obviously, but the trick to recording songs and investing that kind of liking a song enough to record it and release it and share it, you really have to own it. So you have to spend some time and do the work, but it really has to resonate in your own voice. And once I have a sense of it, I will take that song and I'll beat it up until it fits my voice, and I don't really. I mean, not everybody's in favor of that. I know some academics would be no, but I do have the variance. I understand the academics of it, but I think artistically it's important to kind of disregard that to a point and then try to bring it to the now. What would this song sound like now? What's the best way to serve this song today to the best of my abilities? And my ability, what I mean is mostly my voice, So
I agree. I think that's a classic debate, the tradition versus the evolution, and it's an ongoing thing. But I've come to kind of think you sort of need both. You do need people to document and preserve it, and but if you stay too much in that camp, it sort of becomes a museum piece, and then you're not going to allow. For example, you would never allow an acoustic guitar into Irish traditional music because that didn't happen in the 1800s, right? But of course, now it becomes part of the tradition.
Yeah.
Or bouzouki, exactly.
Came from Greece, I think,
That's
but
right.
All of a sudden in the 70s, it was Planxty had it and
That's
it was
it.
everywhere, Donald Lunny
Yep.
made the bouzouki a thing.
That's right.
Now everyone's got one. I think that's fair. I mean, a lot of these songs have 30 verses and no chorus. There's sometimes and there's something about it that you're right. I mean, Bold Fisherman, this is a medieval song. I think that goes back to the 1400s. And I had to do some serious editing on that to get the story essentially in, I think it's 7 or 8 verses still. As I walked out one May morning down by the riverside, there I beheld a bold fisherman come rowing on the tide, come rowing on the tide. It's still a pretty long song, but it was a lot longer. Every variant that I found was 20 verses or more.
Yeah,
It's just too much for our distracted,
It is. It's not. You
when
look
a song
at some
is 7
of the.
minutes, it's a lot, unless it's Pink Floyd.
You look at some of the content. It's tough enough to memorize it and be able to sing it. Never mind.
Yeah, it is.
To it.
And I guess back in the day, it was a slower time, and they had the time, and they they were interested in the narrative specifically, and it was passed down word of mouth. It was a thing. In Newfoundland, everyone had a recitation or a song that they would do.
Yep.
Everyone. There was no one excluded. There was very few people. Everyone had something. Someone had this song, and if you gathered at a party, then everyone had their party song or 2 songs.
Yep.
If you were good, you got to do 2, but and that was it. Then you were done.
Yep.
But everyone had one, and a lot of them were recitations. And they were like Robert W. Service type things. They would just, they'd have to be very good at it to maintain your attention for 10 or 11 or 12 minutes.
Yeah.
So they're hard to do. I mean, that's especially with an audience who are kind of like not sober, and you're talking to them and delivering. This is pretty Academy Award kind of performances to sell them.
I'm really intrigued by that because I've only ever seen that in Ireland, and it blows me away when you do have a kind of a rowdy bar, and then sometimes all of a sudden people start shushing each other, and someone will just start delivering this story, and then oftentimes they can be quite humorous as well. And there's a certain cadence to it, but I didn't know that was something that carried on in Newfoundland as well.
Yeah, no, when I was growing up, I don't know if it's still like if the next generation will, but when I was growing up in our parties and stuff, there was always room for that, and we often saw it. And my dad used to do them like they were always around. The recitation was a thing, and I know what you mean. Like at sessions in Ireland, the singer is afforded great respect. The tune players are going and everyone's yakking, and then if someone, man or woman, sings, there's no talk, let it happen. And I've heard recitations there, or even just sung a cappella, these beautiful ballads, like the Bold Fisherman, which is a beautiful story, which is a child ballad. That they exist there in raw form still. Beautifully too, but it was great. In Newfoundland, I tried to reproduce that, but I could never get everyone to shut up. It's never going to happen.
It's great.
What jumped out to me listening to the album and, on the topic of people with something to say worth listening to, and knowing a bit of, your history, in the song "The Shantyman's Life," the way that you speak about it's a weary life and people think it's free from care, and I was really struck at the back end by, actually I would give it all up to go and be in the warm arms of my wife.
That shanty I'll give o'er if I land safe on shore. I'll lead a different life. No more will I roam, but contented stay at home in the warm arms of my loving wife. In the warm arms of my loving wife.
And I was struck by, and whether intentional or not, the echoes with your own journey. And I wonder if you might just speak to us a little bit about that and the book that you released with your wife earlier in the pandemic.
Yeah, The Shantyman's Life was the first one I knew I was going to record because it is a weird little song. It's a dark little song, and it's very honest. It's an emotional song. A lot of sea shanties in particular are, there might be some longing, but there was something really, he was just very, the lyrics and that, and I didn't change them at all. I mean, I think I took out one line about drinking because I've been in recovery for 10 years. But it just struck me as like, it's very plain spoken and sincere. So I was drawn to that. And that always rings true to me. And that's when I find those kinds of lyrics, it works in my vocal range. Like I seem to be, my voice likes that. My voice is attracted to truth. And one good reason we put out, literally at the week the pandemic came out, myself and Andrea wrote this book about, I've been in recovery for 10 years. And so that was a big, it took us a couple of years to write that. And it's basically the story of my addiction, why it started. I was sexually abused by a Catholic priest when I was a teenager, and deals with like how people use drugs and drink for reasons and how dark it can get and how dangerous it is, but then how you can get out of that if you work hard enough and believe, that you're worthy of redemption and love. So it's a book, it's littered with songs. I don't think there's any shanties in it, but it's a lot of songs I've written. I've always believed strongly that music is strong medicine, and there's a series of records that I've produced solo. 2 were not sober, Lullabies for Bloodshot Eyes and Son of a Sailor, which had some cool sea shanty songs on them. But then I kind of switched gears and put out Help Yourself when I sobered up in 2013 actually. I released it in 2014. And then it was I Love You, which was, just really in real-time evolution, like almost chronicling, like, this is what recovery is. And then There's a Place. I think I was 6 years sober then. And it's funny, like on my 10th anniversary year, it'll be Back to the Sea, Back to the Sea. And I think, for a while I felt that kind of song might be a trigger for me. And it was just, I knew I had to be careful with it, but I don't know if I'm stronger now or I've proved myself, but it doesn't, I'm happy waving the Shanty Man flag again. I feel like the past is no longer a prison for me and it's no longer a threat to me. I feel really strong. And these songs, certainly during the pandemic, they really spoke to strength. They spoke to, there's a real power to them. And if I could share that, like one good reason, I believe it'll help people. Sharing my story will have an impact on people's lives. Singing these songs the way that I do, I'm really proud of this project. I think once it gets out there, it has the power. I believe it has the power to really have a positive impact on a person's day, and that's all that matters. That's all we can. I mean, that's all, we only live one day at a time. And this shanty thing it took me a winter to make it, but I think it can really change an hour of your life, and that's important.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute treat to listen to and also to chat with you. I know we're bumping up against time, so I wanted to just say a real heartfelt thank you for making the time to chat with us. Congratulations on an amazing album. How can people find out more about you and the album? SeanMcCannSings.com, and that's the Shanty Man record there. I don't know if you can get it in shot there, but you probably have it. There's me on the back.
The tracks. Anyway, there's a limited edition CD available. 1,000. We're almost at 800 sold. So I'm completely unfunded and scandal free. I wanted to break even, and I just broke even about 100 CDs ago. So I'm in the green. Digital downloads are also available from there. It's not available for streaming services and won't be until, I don't know, next year maybe, or the year out, or maybe not. It's just not a concern.
I appreciate your stand against the streaming man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean,
I saw you
eventually
write
there's
about
people
it. Yeah.
still wondering and demanding it. It's so convenient. I mean, it's hard to argue with it, but it's just unfair. I made $640 on Spotify on 5 CDs, 54 songs, 90,000 followers since 2015, and the guy who owns Spotify made $4.8 billion. So he can afford to pay more than 1/1000th of a penny per stream. I just think it's unfair. And you know what? I don't, for the sake of $640, you know, it's not a small amount. It's significant, I suppose, but it's not enough to keep me there.
Yeah.
You know, I'll probably go back once I make my next Shantyman record. Maybe I'll put a track or two on Spotify if it helps build a brand and get the news out there.
Yeah.
But and thanks for having me on your show. You guys are Shantymen. I need to grow a freaking beard, is what I I do not. One of these things is not like the other.
This is a real pandemic beard, I'll tell you. Look, you start working on it. We'll swing up to Manitic. We'll do a little distanced sing along if you're up for it.
I'll get the beard rocking. It might take a while. My beard comes out white now, you see. And I don't feel like I'm a true Shantyman. I think they had beards. Yeah. Gonna get one.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Sean. It's been an absolute joy chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks, lads. I'm off to the Shantyman skate park now. Get my kids.
All right. Thanks so much for your time. Hey, we'll look you up. If we can find you somewhere up in Manitic, if we could bump into each other and do a set together somewhere. If you needed some thick male vocal backups on an
We're pretty
album or
thick.
something.
Right on, guys. Lay it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're gonna
Huge
slather
fans.
it on thick, I'd say. Well, I'll see you guys. You're in Toronto too, right? I thought you were. In
Yeah,
Toronto,
that's right. Yeah.
Anyway, I gotta go, but thanks, guys. Really
Thanks
appreciate
very
it,
much.
and I look forward to hearing the show.
Right on.
Stay
Right on.
calm
Thanks so much.
and shanty on.
Right on. Thanks, dude.
Well, that was tremendous. And a huge thanks again to Sean McCann for making the time to speak with us. And thank you for listening. We have a lot of great other conversations coming up as well. Keep watching the space. If you haven't liked and subscribed, we're going to be talking to Kimber's Man. We're going to be talking to John Darley from The Longest Johns. So we're really excited to keep this Shanty Show train rolling. Thanks so much, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
We'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. We'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. We'd be all right if the wind was in our sails. And we'll all hang on behind, and we'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along. We'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. Well, a little good news would go a long way. A little good news would go a long way. A little good news would go a long way. And we'll along, we'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. We'll be alright, we'll make it through the storm. We'll be alright, we'll make it through the storm. We'll be alright, we'll make it through the storm, and we'll all hang on behind. And we'll roll the old chariot along, we'll roll the old chariot along, we'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. And we'll roll the old chariot along, we'll roll the old chariot along, we'll roll the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind. We'll be